Curved or L-shaped cranks have to be one of the dumbest designs I have ever seen. Why? Well, because when they launched some 40 years ago, people immediately called BS on the design and the so-called performance gains. There was no magic to overcome the laws of physics, no scientific test to show the benefits, no data to assess, no clever engineering, and it seemed like no common sense was applied. Now those are some particularly harsh words, but with the luxury of hindsight, it's easy to look back and say, what the hell was everyone thinking? So, what are these ridiculous looking cranks? Why did they exist? And what was the reason they became such a massive tech flop? Well, you're watching GCNTech, and if you're new here, hit the subscribe button to get the most from our channel. These crazy looking cranks might look impressive and be new to you, but their design is most certainly not. Their origins go as far back as the 1930s, with a French manufacturer developing some curly cranks as a way to try to improve pedaling efficiency and eradicate the so-called dead spot at the bottom of each pedal stroke. Now, I managed to find some images of a set of cranks fitted to a gent's bicycle that was listed for sale online, and the design really is most bizarre. But as interesting as they look, even back then, written news articles questioned the design. One article reads, "We're afraid we must give as our opinion that the claimed advantages for this unusual design are based upon a fallacy." Strong words, but clearly not strong enough, because more curved cranks started to see the light of day. In fact, curved cranks were breaking world records, with a rider called Harry Grant setting the motor-paced records for 5, 10 and 50 kilometer distances, and then continuing on to set a new world record for the hour, 52 miles, 215 yards, which is about 83.9 kilometers. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm going to throw it out there and say that it wasn't all down to the cranks. Following on from these curved cranks came a few slight variations. You had the Chandez L cranks, the chromed Rosa cranks from Cyclo, and my personal favourites have to be the ones branded super fast. I mean, if there is even the slightest bit of doubt over the potential advantages of your product, I think using the name super fast is a brilliant idea. The superfast crank seemed to use a less exaggerated curve than the other designs, but all of these brands were seemingly brushing over the huge elephant in the room, and that was the fact that it doesn't matter what crazy shape or design you use, the only measurement that actually matters is the position of the pedal axle relative to the centre of where the cranks meet the bottom bracket, which in the most basic principle is called a lever. In fact, these obscure designs were often worse than the products that they were trying to replace. They required more material, making the cranks heavier. The indirect crank shape meant there was more flex in the crank, and then the obscure angles concentrated stress in unusual areas, leading to stress fractures in many cases. Now, I'm not a product engineering expert, but to myself and most people, those seem like issues that it's best to try to avoid. But apparently not, with brands like P&P and Z-Torque releasing even more extreme designs later down the line. P&P were by far the most common and popular, but the Z-Torque cranks get my vote for the most extreme design. So 12 or so years ago, the project launched on Kickstarter, and just like all of the other wonky cranks, there were some fairly questionable physics examples involved here, and what I can only describe as an incredible on-bike demo of the so-called extra speed that the cranks would give you. Ultimately, the project failed to reach its funding goal and only reached 5% of its target from 46 backers. Now, if you did so happen to have $200 burning a hole in your back pocket, that investment was said to get you a set of Z-Torque cranks in carbon fibre for the ultimate rockstar treatment, but from what I can see online, it would appear no one ever received their carbon fibre cranks. However, the brand which seemed to make the most progress was called P&P with their Bravatato cranks. In fact, they did so long before the Z-Torque cranks, and they did that back in the 1980s when they were being used by a number of high-profile racers. An old advert at the time stated the cranks were being used by Italian cyclocross champions and leading Italian time trialists, and the concept was said to provide a more consistent follow-through pedal action. Now, back in the 1980s, this tech was yours for the price of £96, which in today's money would be around £550, €650 or $650. Not that you can actually get hold of any though, because the vast majority were reported to have failed, and therefore it is near impossible to find any of them online. Now, if you do so happen to have a set of these cranks squirreled away in your garage and you've had the chance to actually ride a set back in the day, well, please do get involved in the comments section down below and share your experiences, because I'm really keen to find out. So, at this point, it should be pretty clear as to what actually went wrong here. It's simply a case of form over function and people's willingness to try to develop products that seem to defy the laws of physics. Simply put, the cranks on our bikes are there to convert the up and down linear motion from our legs into a rotational movement to then drive the chain, which in turn rotates the rear wheel. Now, while crank design is important in terms of weight and strength, the key aspect, as I mentioned earlier, is the position of the pedal axle relative to the crank center. And the most effective way to link these two different positions together is in a perfectly straight line, just like we see with every single crankset that's out there today. The specific impact of crank length on performance is something that has been thoroughly researched and tested even in modern times today, and we are typically seeing crank lengths get shorter and shorter. Where 175mm was once considered the normal for cranks, we're starting to see some of the world's best riders like Tadej Pogačar using cranks as short as 165mm long. And the general thought is the shorter the crank, it could be better for more riders. Where the perfect balance lies is yet to be found, and is of course going to vary from person to person. So, wonky, curved, L or Z-shaped cranks, in my mind, are a categorical tech failure. But what do you think? Well, let me know in the comments section down below, and also let me know if you'd like to see any other videos taking a closer look at different products which have failed due to their designs and concepts. And then finally, if you have enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, hit the like button and share it far and wide for all your friends to see. Right, I'm out of here. See you later.